Has anyone ever gotten tired of the epithets thrown between the sides of capitalist versus communist or even socialist? Well, I've got some good news for you. So we're going to start out with a couple of video clips from Rational National on the FTC's decision to ban no competition clauses. And then we're going to see who's defending, quote, capitalism, unquote, and who's trying to kill it.
This is a huge proposal and would have a big impact both on the amount of money that people make and really society at large.
The FTC is on the verge of increasing your paycheck. This from the New York Times. The proposed rule would ban provisions of labor contracts known as non-compete agreements, which prevent workers from leaving for a competitor or starting a competing business for months or years after their employment, often within a certain geographic area. The agreements have applied to workers as varied as sandwich makers, hairstylists, doctors, and software engineers. Studies show that non-competes, which appear to directly affect roughly 20% to 45% of U.S. workers in the private sector, hold down pay because job switching is one of the more reliable ways of securing a raise. Other studies show that non-competes protect established companies from startups, reducing competition within industries. The arrangements may also harm productivity by making it hard for companies to hire workers who best fit their needs. The FTC proposal is the latest in a series of aggressive and sometimes unorthodox moves to rein in the power of large companies under the agency's chair, Lina Khan. So I'm going to get to a little more here. So that's the overall view around, $300 billion in wages lost per year because of these non-competes alone. But here is where Lina Khan fields a lot of these questions from the pro-business angle. So, of course, 4 minutes of this, but it's worth watching.
What do you say to some?
How she responds to all of it, because she has a great response to all of it and does a good job here at shutting down all of these pro-business positions.
Somebody the critique of this would just say, okay, there's a free market, and the employer effectively is paying for the privilege. They are paying you effectively for the non-compete. So meaning people can agree to contracts, and one of the contractual terms may very well be, I'm going to pay you a little bit extra, or whatever you think is appropriate, so that you don't go off and work for my competitor tomorrow.
Yeah, in theory, I think we've seen that people suggest there is that premium. I think we don't always see that in practice. Sometimes employers are actually imposing these on workers even after they've agreed to a job. I think what we've also seen is that on net, this can be bad for competition in ways that we should be concerned about regardless. At the FTC, sometimes we hear from founders who were able to secure capital, they were looking to enter a market, they were able to build the factory, but at the end of the day, they weren't able to build and scale because all the relevant workers, the talent, was locked up. And I think when you look at states like California, that for decades have rendered non-competes non-enforceable, I think you can see that there can be a huge boon to innovation and competition.
What about the idea of trade secrets? So part of this, and a lot of this comes from tech, where people have a view that there are folks who are engineers or others or in healthcare who have trade secrets. They know stuff. And so you don't want them to be able to go across the street and take either the trade secrets themselves or even sort of adjacent knowledge, if you will, in the immediate term at least, right? It's not necessarily just the trade secret unto itself. It's, you know what, even if they don't tell the other employer exactly what the other guys, they know too much, and that has value, at least in the first 6 months to a year out from that job. So we want to hold you away from having that happen for some period of time or what have you.
Look, it's a reasonable concern. And at this stage, what we've seen is that there are alternative tools to non-competes that you can use to protect legitimate trade secrets, legitimate IP. So you can use non-disclosure agreements that can be tailored. We also have trade secrets law, right? Employers bring hundreds of lawsuits a year to enforce trade secrets.
The conundrum there is that's after the fact. It's typically, when I say after the fact, it's typically after somebody has arguably taken a trade secret and used it. And so the employer has.
I just got to look at how proactive this network is when it comes to defending the profits of massive corporations.
has been, quote unquote, injured, right?
Which, by the way, last point on this, I've said this before. CNBC is a business network. There is no equal of that on the employer side. There is no union network from NBC. So there's NBC, which is already pro-corporate. Then there's CNBC, which is tailor-made for large corporations. There is no labor NBC. Just to give you, again, the which is, yes, obvious because we're talking about capitalism. This is how they operate.
To continue this discussion, I will refer to the IMF's definition of the pillars of capitalism, and we're going to tease apart the debate between these two in light of this information. Clearly, one of these things is not like the other. And what we're seeing here is that the FTC, the so-called communist, socialist, liberal, yada, 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 is actually defending 3 pillars of capitalism. And it's the businessman who is the anti-capitalist. Now, I know that there are many on the left are going to say, but of course, contradictions of capitalism. Yes, but I have a separate point. As written, most of these pillars are not objectionable. Freedom to go where you want, the freedom to work for whom you want, the freedom to start up a business on your own. All these are fine. The objections come from other areas, which I think we all understand. We simply don't have the time to indulge in a bunch of mad billionaires who think that they're better than everyone else, when all of history, and I mean over thousands of years, it's been shown that wealth has wealth, and they're just as subject to all the mistakes and fallacies the rest of us are. And the problem now is they have this frightening amount of political and economic power that they are absolutely convinced they're infallible. It's nuts. We should not submit to this. We should not cede our sovereignty to a bunch of people that are no better than us. Remember also that for 50 years, many of the rich have seen us as a threat to stability and order. They have contempt for us. They see us as an evil, and that our prosperity is an evil, and that they are the center of stability and order, when they clearly are not. We need to bust their ideological hammer. They are anti-capitalist. The left is defending many of these pillars, the ones that everybody could agree with. And they are against them. They are not what they say they are. And it's fully proper to tear apart their claimed legitimacy on this point, because then we can move on to a discussion of what is really happening, hopefully.